In a quiet kingdom by the sea, where the wind carried salt and memory, there lived a girl named Annabel Lee. She belonged to that place in a way few ever do. The ocean knew her footsteps. The moon recognized her silence. Even the waves seemed to soften when she stood at the shore, her dark hair moving gently with the night breeze, her eyes fixed on a horizon that felt more like a promise than a distance. I met her when we were both young, too young to know how fragile happiness can be, too innocent to imagine that love might one day demand a price. Our world was small, a stretch of sand, a narrow village, a sea that breathed and listened. But love does not need a large world. It only needs two hearts willing to stay. Annabel Lee loved with a quiet intensity. She did not speak often of dreams or futures, yet everything about her felt certain. When she smiled, it was as though she already knew what forever meant. At night, we would sit by the shore and listen to the water speak in its endless language. She believed the sea remembered everything, that it never forgot a name, a touch, a promise whispered under moonlight. Even if one day I am gone, she once said softly, the sea will still know me. I laughed then. Death felt like a distant rumor, something meant for stories and old songs. We were alive, we were together. Surely that was enough. Our love was simple, but it was absolute. It did not ask for witnesses. It did not need approval. We belonged to each other in the quiet ways that matter most. Shared silences, unspoken understanding, hands finding one another in the dark. But love that burns purely does not go unnoticed. There are forces in this world, call them fate, time, or even heaven itself, that grow restless in the presence of such devotion. Something about our happiness stirred a quiet envy, like a shadow moving behind the stars. The winter came early that year. The air grew sharper. The sea lost its calm. The wind no longer sang. It warned. Annabel Lee fell ill not suddenly, but gently, as though life itself was loosening its grip. She grew pale, her breath shallow, her strength fading like moonlight at dawn. I stayed beside her. I told her stories of warmer days, of spring returning, of us growing old together by the shore. She listened, smiling faintly, but her eyes held a knowing sadness. Some truths arrive before words. One night, when the moon hung low and bright, she reached for my hand. "If they take me from you," she whispered, "do not let them take my love too." Her fingers were cold, but her touch was certain. That was the night the wind howled like grief itself. That was the night the sea fell silent. Annabel Lee slipped away as quietly as she had lived, leaving behind a stillness so deep it felt heavier than sound. They buried her near the ocean, where the waves could reach her even in death. The villagers said it was a kindness. I think the sea demanded her back. They told me time would heal. They said I must move on. They said love like that was meant to fade. They were wrong. Each night, I returned to her resting place. I lay beside her grave and listened to the water roll in and out, steady and eternal. In the hush between waves, I felt her presence, not as memory, but as something living. The moon never rose without bringing her face to my mind. The stars never shone without reminding me of her eyes. Even the wind seemed to carry her name. If angels watched us, they must have trembled. If heaven measured devotion, it would have found ours unbreakable. For love does not end simply because a heart stops beating. It continues in absence, in longing, in the quiet refusal to forget. Years passed. My hair turned gray. The village changed. But every night, I returned to the sea. I spoke to her in the language of memory. I told her of the world as it moved on without her. I told her she was still loved. And sometimes, only sometimes, the waves answered. Not with words, but with understanding, because Annabel Lee was never truly gone. She lived in the tide that touched the shore. She lived in the moonlight that softened the dark. She lived in the heart that refused to surrender. They took her from me, but they could not take her love. And as long as the sea remembers, as long as the moon still rises, Annabel Lee remains forever mine.